Welcome to this celebration of Holy Cross Church and 170 years of the Catholic faith in D'Hanis. We've got quite a story to tell, so let's get started. Here's Holy Cross Church as it looks today, and as it has been since it was built in 1964. Let's tour the church and see what's inside. You're looking at the sanctuary with the main altar and tabernacle, and some of the many statues that are found here. Here's the left side altar. It's got a life-size statue of St. Dominic, plus St. Anthony there on the altar in the background. Here's the right side altar. Over here are a painting of Our Lady of Guadalupe and a statue of St. Teresa the Little Flower. Notice also the stained glass window showing the Nativity. In the foyer behind the baptismal fount is this statue of the child Jesus as teacher. To one side is the Pietà. Other features inside the church are the pipe organ next to the choir loft, and of course the stained glass windows, including this one of the Crucifixion. Here's a better view of some of the statues in the sanctuary: the Madonna and Child, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and of course there are St. Dominic and St. Anthony again. There are more: St. Teresa with the roses, St. Rita holding a cross, and some very modern-looking statues of Jesus of the Sacred Heart and St. Joseph. On either side of the altar are these praying angels. Remember these for later on. Other decorative features include an icon of Mary, a painting of the Passion of Christ, and this wood carving that shows a French couple looking out the window at two church steeples. The carving was a gift of the people of the next-door villages of Niederensen and Oberensen in Alsace. Several of the founding families of D'Hanis came from that area along the Rhine where France and Germany meet. Of course, 170 years takes us back a lot farther than 1964. Catholics in D'Hanis have worshipped in at least 4 other church buildings, some with different names. But since the very beginning, there's always been a Holy Cross of some kind in D'Hanis. When D'Hanis was founded in 1847, it was on the western frontier of Texas. San Antonio was a 2-day walk to the east, and Henry Castro's largest settlement at Castroville was a 1-day trip. With no timber or building stones available, settlers made their homes of mesquite poles set vertically in the ground, chinked with mud, and roofed with woven grass like this model. But even so, look at that red circle. A traveler who passed through in the early 1850s noted that some houses sported a distinctive grass topknot woven in the shape of a cross. The town was served at first by circuit-riding priests from Castroville, who said Mass in a small log enclosure at the center of the village. Meanwhile, a large cross was erected atop a hill south of D'Hanis to serve as both an inspiration and a navigation aid for travelers in what was then a sea of tall grass. It wasn't long, just 6 years after its founding, that D'Hanis got its first pastor, and also its first permanent church building. The priest was named Dominic Messens, and maybe it wasn't a coincidence that the small stone structure was called St. Dominic's. As the town began to grow, the original St. Dominic's was enlarged into the much larger stone structure that you see here. The builder was Ben Bato, who was an original D'Hanis settler. Some years later, a young carpenter named Alf Zinsmeyer came to town and found a job building the steeple for St. Dominic's. There's a strong similarity between this church and the old St. Joseph's Catholic Church in downtown San Antonio. The town and the parish continued to grow, with a large rectory to the right of the church and a cemetery to the left. Not shown in this picture is a stone school building that was also part of St. Dominic's. This picture was taken in 1912. The photographer's automobile found its way into the photo. Check out the umbrella that serves as its convertible top. Here's something rare, a photo showing the interior of old St. Dominic's. Praying angels flank the altar, and in the center above all the other statues is none other than St. Dominic. Father Wirtz followed Father Messens as pastor of St. Dominic's. In fact, he was the last pastor of the parish. Here he is, in front of the rectory with his buggy and his pet dog. D'Hennis was a thriving community in the decades after the Civil War, and here is an end-of-year photo of the Catholic school students, taken in 1907. That's not the school in the background, it's St. Dominic's Church. D'Hennis was shaken to its foundations by the arrival in 1880 of the railroad. Railroad agents wanted local citizens to pay a bonus to help finance construction of the tracks through town. D'Hennis's conservative townspeople declined, but a landowner a mile to the west agreed to pay the bonus, and so the depot literally missed D'Hennis by a mile. Around the depot grew a new town site with cattle shipping pens and stores and saloons, and soon there were two competing communities, each with its own public school, each with its own businesses. But the new town gained the upper hand after the post office and the official name of D'Hennis moved to the depot. D'Hennis was New Town to the original residents, and the original D'Hennis became Old Town. Over time, more businesses grew around the railroad. Still, St. Dominic's in Old D'Hennis remained the only Catholic church. Something had to give. The change started with construction of a new Catholic school in Newtown. St. Dominic's School was closed, and St. Anthony's School was built in 1908. In 1912, Father Francis Moss arrived as the new pastor. He would stay in D'Hennis for 23 years, and he soon established himself as an energetic and enterprising member of the community. He began organizing large processions up the Cross Hill to celebrate feast days or to pray for rain. 2 years after he arrived, the winds of change favored moving the D'Hennis parish from Old Town to New. Ironically, Father Moss would build not just one, but 2 new churches there. Here's a 1914 architect's drawing of the proposed church to be built in New D'Hennis. It would be a grand structure, built of D'Hennis bricks. Father Moss gave it a new name, Holy Cross Church, in honor of the Cross Hill in Old D'Hennis. Here's Holy Cross Church, ready to open less than a year after construction began. Note the blank white windows. Father Moss had ordered stained glass windows from Germany, but World War I began in Europe shortly after construction started, and due to wartime disruption, Holy Cross Church opened with giant sheets of canvas hung where the windows would have been. Early morning masses in wintertime must have been a very cold experience. Here's how the old Holy Cross Church looked in its heyday, probably in the early 1960s. A massive steeple housed 3 bells. Stained glass windows were everywhere, and the interior was painted, marbled, and gold-leafed. Here's the altar and tabernacle, where the priest faced away from the congregation according to the pre-Vatican II custom. The church interior reveals a painted church, long before tourism officials applied the term to Catholic churches east of San Antonio. By the way, there's St. Dominic again, over on the left next to Our Lady of Guadalupe. A large pipe organ can barely be seen at the back of the choir loft at the rear of the church. The beauty of the interior is shown to good advantage in this photo of a wedding at Holy Cross Church. And then, one Friday morning in late May of 1963, someone saw smoke on the roof of the church. Firefighters from D'Hennis and Hondo arrived quickly, but the blaze spread through the attic and soon engulfed the structure. Before the ceiling collapsed, volunteers rushed into the church and removed whatever valuable objects they could, including most of the statues. The structure that replaced the ornate old church was a modern but plain building whose only concession to tradition was to have its bell tower located at the center rather than at one corner of the building. Fire codes wouldn't allow it to be connected to the main structure so that it wouldn't act as a chimney in case of another fire. I mentioned earlier that Father Moss built 2 churches in D'Hennis. After 1910, many Spanish-speaking Catholics began arriving from Mexico, where a violent revolution was underway. To serve their needs, in 1920, Father Moss constructed this church, Our Lady Queen of Peace, on the same block as Holy Cross. By 1951, its congregation was merged with Holy Cross, and Queen of Peace was torn down in 1953. Queen of Peace also had its own parochial school, taught by Spanish-speaking nuns. It was destroyed by a fire in 1947. To recap, here are the interiors of St. Dominic's on the left and the Old Holy Cross on the right. Note the similarities of the statuary. Mary and Jesus, the praying angels, and all of these other statues. Here are some of the former pastors of Holy Cross Church. Top left is Father Henry Hugg, who came to D'Hanis from a parish in a rough part of San Antonio, where he was known as the pistol-packing padre. In the center is Father Patrick Sheridan, who was pastor when Holy Cross Church burned and the new church was built. At right is Father Wallace Stiles, another long-serving Holy Cross pastor. Bottom left is Father Tony Costantino, who was here in the 1970s and 80s. And bottom right is Father Victor Schmidzinski, who nurtured those large pecan trees that shade the Holy Cross grounds. And here's Father Antonio, currently at Holy Cross, although that's San Fernando Cathedral, not Holy Cross, in the background. After Holy Cross was built, St. Dominic's was abandoned, but its limestone walls still stand in Old D'Hanis, next to the town's oldest cemetery. Next to the historical marker is a bell that once hung in Queen of Peace Church. The Hispanic heritage of both Holy Cross and Queen of Peace is preserved in this double grotto at the south end of the church grounds. Our Lady of Guadalupe, with St. Juan Diego kneeling before her, is on the left. Jesus of the Sacred Heart is on the right. This unique Spanish-language dedication plaque, engraved on a D'Hanis tile, gives thanks for lives saved in the disastrous flood of 1935. Holy Cross also serves the Mission Church of the Immaculate Heart of Mary in Yancey. Here's the interior of that beautiful church. In recent years, the tradition of processing up the Cross Hill on Good Friday has been revived. At left is the old tin chapel, now gone, that Father Moss erected at the summit. At right is a north-facing vista that shows the Stations of the Cross along the road up the hill. In the background, you can see Old Holy Cross Church at the far left and Old D'Hanis at the far right. No member of Guillaume d'Anis's family had visited the town named for him until late in the 20th century, when a priest from Belgium, who's a relative of the town's namesake, stopped in for a visit. So, what do we take from this 170-year story? Simply this: Holy Cross Church contains many visible reminders of the structures that came before it. But it isn't just a building. The Catholic Church in D'Hanis wasn't built of bricks or stones or logs or woven grass. For 170 years, it's been a living, thriving community of faith, continually under construction, located wherever the community gathers to worship. This sign says it all.